The other way, though, again, is to do this, is to get the money, is to partner. Then you make the arrangement with the country, with the other college, and now you make the financial arrangement through that.
There is one more question here with regards to the limitations to online study. Is there any limitations to online study on certain disciplines or studies?
Very quickly, I got a World Health Organization $100,000 grant 3 years ago to develop a course, and I decided to develop the lowest level first year foundations course, which would be the equivalent of 12th grade chemistry. And I developed it for students in the Pacific. It was an online course, and these kids in Vanuatu, English was their fourth language, and they had no computer skills. It was delivered also to the Solomon Islands. Their computer access was a little bit better, but not good. Fiji, a little bit better than that. We made it highly interactive. The students in the 3 countries had different activities with each other, and they loved that. The questions were all put in context. They dealt with pollution among the different 3 countries. The other part of it is the labs. We just held traditional labs, and that was simple as that. They were labs done at the college, or they could have been done at the local high school, or we could have sent a lab kit to be done. But I mean, there's certain things that cannot be done online, but there are always ways to get around that.
No more questions at this time.
Okay. The international acceptance is going to be an issue because of accreditation. In the United States, it's not an issue because everyone has the same accreditation. All the accreditation agencies, oh, sorry. Let me go back here. If I can get this to go back. There we go. All the accreditation agencies follow the same rules. Once you go international, that's not the same. In Indonesia, for example, only roughly half of the institutions are accredited, and many of those, when it comes time for accreditation, they will rent equipment and put it in before the accreditors come. So, what do you do now if you're Australian university and you're partnering with a Canadian university, and you want these courses to be recognized in both countries? Now it becomes a question of international accreditation, and whose accreditation do you follow, or both, or things like that. Who gets the credit for the courses? It becomes an international nightmare. Now picture, those are two universities. Now just picture all the possible combinations. It's like Goldilocks and 3 beers. Some will be too hot, some will be too cold, and if they don't figure this out, the whole international distance learning will go running off into the woods. There's got to become a way to get international accreditation. Well, what about U.S. accreditation? I said the American accreditation should be prepared. Nobody cares. China couldn't care less about U.S. accreditation. And in many of these other countries, U.S. now is at a major disadvantage. China and India are going to do everything they possibly can to assist Indira Gandhi and the Chinese universities to become major players in online learning. At the same time, the United States accreditation agencies are blocking international distance learning. You've got to check with your mission statement. You've got to go through all of these processes. It's a very, very difficult situation, and as federal regulations have gotten more strict, the accreditation requirements have gotten more strict. So What is happening now at a time when the online global learning is becoming more attractive, government regulations in the U.S. are making it less viable for U.S. institutions to get into it. Another obstacle for global distance learning is a business model. It's one thing to talk about it, it's another thing to do it. If you take McDonald's, when things got healthy, within a short period of time, they put in salads. Kentucky Fried Chicken, all of a sudden, when fat was no good, fried food was no good, they just called themselves KFC and dropped the fried part of it. Universities have to be able to do that too, but that's very difficult because departments are used to following rules and doing the same thing. Another issue that goes back with international acceptance is university cultural differences. It is not that easy for an Australian university to deal with an Indian university. They think and talk and act alike, and there are different views about things. There are different views about money and relationships, and so universities must develop these cultural understanding. Finances will be an issue because you're trying to develop this at a time when there's less money. And the culture, we'll talk about that in a little minute. Okay, so there are roadblocks. One of the major roadblocks that is going to will face online global learning is the pedagogy and called in a virtual classroom that is multicultural. If you're teaching in areas that have a diverse population, a culturally diverse population, you run into some of this, but you're still working in a cultural setting in which the people are in the same setting. Once you go global learning, now you've got somebody sitting in China, sitting in Indonesia, sitting in Italy, sitting anywhere and taking your course. And guess what? They have different pedagogy. Some are work in groups, some work in individual learning. Chinese students, if you don't give me points, I don't do it. If I'm an Indian student, don't put me in groups because the others will cheat from me. If I'm a Fijian student, I love to work in groups. These kind of differences are going to run through your courses. You have to learn then, how do I balance my virtual global course to deal with these differences, group versus individual, and how am I going to be able to be aware and to catch problems before they get out of hand. Language skills, that's been brought up before. You're going to have multilingual students, and this has to be taken into account. The fact of the matter is, though, I think that language skills are probably less of a problem online than they are face-to-face, because the student has more time to prepare their answers and think about their results. We found in our students the same thing. We thought that the students would be very reluctant to talk online. We found that not to be the case. And in fact, we found that the female students, Indian female students, are generally they defer to male students, did not defer online. And it didn't take them long at all to make that change. Okay, let's go back to a question that I didn't ask yet. Have you noted any changes in accreditation requirements that affect your ability to expand your distance learning market? Sorry, Assad, for missing that one.
So the poll is open, only 20% voted. I'm going to keep it open for the next 10 seconds.
Okay.
Okay, so people are voting right now. Okay, I'm going to close that. Okay, and that's the answer. The answer is 50-50. 50% yes, 50% no.
Okay. Just to give a quick idea, a sense of how important culture is in this online distance learning. There was a true story about a country whose airlines were having so many crashes that they were being considered to be banned from flying over the United States. The question was, what was the cause of the crashes? And so they did an investigation, and it turned out it wasn't the planes. They were fine. The problem was the pilots. They came from a culture that was highly differential, and the younger pilots were reluctant to tell the older pilots when they saw something that looked dangerous. So by the time they related the information, it was too late and they crashed. They put them through some cultural training, took care of the problem. Another thing, typical example of these pedagogical differences, you have to realize that in different cultures, yes means no, and they will not say no to you because no, that seems to be a sign of disrespect. And just as we need to understand, wherever I say we, meaning whoever you are, your country, needs to understand other cultures, they too need to understand yours. I had a case where a group of South Pacific Islanders moved to the U.S. to work and got jobs in chicken factories in Arkansas. And they were there for a while, and then they got a phone call that one of their relatives died, and they all piled in their cars, they're used to doing, and they headed off to their funeral. Well, a Pacific Island funeral is about a week long. They came back, and they found out they'd been fired. Well, and they also forgot to tell their boss they were leaving. But they said, you can't fire us, that's our culture. And what the company said was, no, you're working here, you've got to understand our culture. So the same thing goes on with our distance learning, only it becomes more important. So we talked about the accreditors. We've got to work out some way of having an international accreditation, and I don't think we've even begun to start to look at that issue. Has not been addressed, and it's going to have to become accepted, because otherwise, what do I do if I get a degree from one of these partnering institutions and nobody accepts it, or business won't accept it, and we don't have an answer for that. Okay. Another challenge for the U.S. Institutions. I said the U.S. seems to be increasingly at a disadvantage when it comes to global learning. This is because of the increased regulations by the federal government, which in turn are increasing the regulations by the accrediting agencies. And what's increasing the government watchfulness has been the for-profit universities that have taken so much of the government grants for students. And so the government has put in more and more requirements, but unfortunately they don't distinguish between a Kaplan University and a tiny little community college in the middle of